I think had it been framed as a tax all the way back when they were having those discussions, I just can't believe that there would have been quite the enthusiasm for a system that's going to say, we're going to take your highest earning, probably your economically most productive people, and disincentivize those people with higher tax rates. I think a lot of the people arguing for that back in the day for this loan system would not have argued had it been framed as a tax. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Personal Investor Podcast. I'm Ed Monk, and I'm joined today by Fidelity's Andrew Oxlade to talk about student loans. It's always a political hot potato, and it's even hotter right now as arguments rage about changes being made to the terms of existing loans. We're going to get into that. Plus, we'll ask whether it makes sense to dodge student loans completely, if you can, and use your savings to pay your, or more likely your child's, university costs. Before that, let me remind you that if you find this video useful or interesting, to please subscribe to the channel, give us a like, leave a comment if you want to do that. And once you've subscribed, remember to hit that bell icon at the top of the page to turn on notifications to make sure you get new content as soon as it is released. That all said, Andrew, welcome along. How are you?
I'm very well, thanks, Ed.
In this conversation, Andrew, we're hoping we can cover off the main features of this student loan system, including what's being changed that's proving so controversial. I think that will be useful for people who are looking to navigate their own decisions around these topics. And we're going to look specifically at whether it makes sense to avoid the loans if you can, based on some of the work that you've done. First of all, though, Andrew, describe for us in the broadest terms how this system works.
As we know, student fees have been applied in recent decades where the student themselves are picking that up. Now, that used to be around £3,000 a year, and then it surged up to this sort of £9,000 level where it remained for a while, and then it's climbed higher. Student loans have been made available to basically cover that cost for the actual fees. And then also there's an additional amount you can borrow for living costs, et cetera, et cetera.
Yes.
And so the reason it's become controversial is because of these the plans of the different types and the terms that are then available on the repayment of those loans. Yes. So broadly speaking, what happens is you borrow the money, you pay inflation-linked interest on it, so it's linked to retail prices index inflation that accrues, and then when you earn over a certain amount, around 29,000 for the one we're talking about, you then begin to repay at 9% of your wages
above that level. So not on your entire salary, just that excess amount, and then if it's not repaid over a certain amount of time, for the plan 2, it's 30 years, then the debt gets wiped. Yes, and the features you've described there, they're kind of common to most people's student loans. We're going to talk about Plan 2, we'll talk about Plan 5. The terminology is not that helpful, but in the broadest terms, that's how they work. And actually the differences between those two or the different plans tend to be around those thresholds, when repayments start, the interest rate applied, how long you have to pay for it. Those are the sort of things that can be dialed up and dialed down depending on the plan.
And they have been.
And that's the controversial part, because all those details make this very unlike the sort of loan that you might get from your bank. And, well, as we'll come on to discuss, much more like a tax, right? And we've covered the building blocks there. Why the controversy at the moment then, given some of those details that you've described?
So the controversy centres around Plan 2. So this is people who would have taken these loans between 2012, 2023. Yeah. So it covers the vast bulk, basically, of people who have this kind of student debt. And essentially, they've tinkered around with the repayment threshold. So instead of it, they basically said they're going to announce a freeze.
Yes.
Which means that rather than it rising with inflation, the level at which you repay means you'll be paying more and sooner. So
good old fiscal drag.
Exactly. Yeah. It's common everywhere, but it's just another example of that. Exactly that.
Yeah. And so the reason this is particularly irksome for the people involved is that they believe they were signing up to a system, a loan. After all, that's what it is. It's a loan. And normally with a loan, you don't expect those terms to be moved about. yet the government is moving them about.
Mm.
That's why I guess people are beginning to get annoyed by this.
Well, I'm sure you remember when we were analysing this stuff when it was first announced,
Indeed.
12, 13 years ago, more than that now, isn't it? The coalition government, etc. And there was that debate then, wasn't there? Is it a graduate tax? Mm-hmm. Or is it actually a loan?
Yeah.
And it seems like that debate has never been, more important to kind of answer that, because the way it's been treated is the critics say looks more like a graduate tax if they're just going to keep fiddling around, and it's not fixed terms as a loan agreement should be. Yeah,
and this is the kind of the government's side of this. They're saying, well, we've got to balance tax and spend. Everyone jumps and says, aha, it's not a tax. Now, I've been looking into this a little bit, and basically what this comes down to, a tax would sit on the government's sort of liabilities, whereas a loan doesn't. It's a kind of an accounting thing. But, and when it comes to our taxes, we all know famously tax rules can change. So, we have to put up with that risk that different governments will come in and change things. But because it's actually a loan, and it's even made by a student loans company, which is a bit of a fictional thing, isn't it? It's still the government. It's kind of a creature of the government.
So, it's the administrator effectively, isn't it?
Yes. People believe they're dealing with a company, and then they should have a contract in place. But of course, in that contract, it says, yes, we can basically change this whenever we want.
And I guess the underpinning though of the controversy is not, that is the sort of latest in it. The real problem is the rates of interest as well on that plan too, where you're paying RPI, so the retail prices index, plus 3% up to that rate. It depends basically. It's higher rates the more you're earning.
Yeah.
And so that's, you're talking about, because inflation has been higher recently and well above the 2% target, it means you may be paying around 7% for some people. And that is very hard to try and clear debt at those levels.
And I think that's been the trigger, isn't it? Lots of people have seen the balance that they can see of their student loan, think that they've been paying it off for a few years, had a few pay rises in that time, got to have cleared, some of it, haven't I? And then they'll look, and that has no been the case, because interest rates has meant it's accelerated way above what they're actually repaying.
Yes. And there's no real mechanism to protect people from that.
Yes. Okay, we're going to leave that. That is the argument. That's why people are reading about it in the news at the moment. Let's leave that there for now and focus on the decision facing anyone entering this system now or thinking about entering it now. They are on the Plan 5 loans, similar in lots of ways, but how does it differ?
So Plan 5 doesn't have that excess interest rate. That's the key difference, i.e. you pay a lower, you pay RPI inflation.
Can we dwell on RPI?
Yes.
Because RPI is an increasingly sort of anachronistic measure. CPI is a much more commonly used measure. The government, when it suits them, says that RPI is no longer fit for purpose. It's choosing it for this. So
yes, I mean the government's supposed to be and has said it's moving away from RPI. Yet sometimes it remains, because of course RPI has run at a higher level. So
traditionally it's been higher than CPI.
Yeah, so you may see a pattern of that in policy, when to deploy which and whether they actually change. To be honest, I think if there was one thing that was going to change in the whole student loan system, that's probably a likely one, because there's already a motion of direction that they do want to move away from that, which should then mean lower repayments as a result, lower interest accruing as a result.
So Plan 5, it's not RPI plus anything, it's RPI.
It's RPI, and then there's also the other key difference is that the debt doesn't get wiped out after 30 years, it's 40 years.
Yeah.
So you're much more likely to repay that loan basically than you would be with the older scheme, with the Plan 2. And
a slightly lower threshold, 25 grand instead of 28.
Lower threshold, right, exactly. Yeah. Yes. And that's the crucial thing, I think, with Plan 5. It's basically now minimum wage. So everybody's going to pay that. Minimum wage, if you're working 40 hours a week, is just over £25,000, and minimum wage is likely to keep rising as well.
And 40 years is a pretty much a whole working career for most people, right?
Yes. So you can see why people then talk again about graduate tax.
It's graduate tax, and just dwelling, it's 9% of earnings above that level.
Yes.
Which is creating very high marginal rates of effective tax, isn't it? Because imagine someone who's just ticked into the higher rate band, they're paying £40,000 of of tax on their earnings above 50-ish thousand pounds,
Mm.
plus another 2% of national insurance, plus another 9% of a student loan, 51% marginal rate.
Exactly.
They keep less than 50p of every pound they're earning above that level.
Which is not a great feeling, is it? And there's lots of arguments around this in terms of the impact on the economy. And there's lots of, I'm sure people have seen this in the news, the stories of people sort of deliberately not trying to get pay rises because they don't see any, getting promotions and driving their careers forward because the money just gets eaten up. So therefore, people opting for 4-day weeks, et cetera, because it just doesn't, it's effectively not paying to work as they're perceiving it.
Yeah, and just at risk of just dipping back into the politics for a second, that's where I think this argument around tax versus loan kind of matters, because I think had it been framed as a tax all the way back when they were having those discussions, I just can't believe that there would have been quite the enthusiasm for a system that's going to say, we're going to take your highest earning, probably your economically most productive people, and disincentivize those people with higher tax rates. I think a lot of the people arguing for that back in the day for this loan system would not have argued had it been framed as a tax. Anyway, I'm going to get off the high horse.
You can make the same. It's the same argument as well with the sort of drag on the economy of all those other cliff edges that we've got in our tax system, which are just grown and got worse over the years.
Indeed.
We've done other podcasts on that, though.
We have indeed. We haven't. So, okay. So Plan 5, we've covered the differences. You wanted to look just recently, Andrew, at whether parents should use their own savings, if they're in the fortunate position of being able to do that, to help their child avoid those costs and clear those costs sooner, or not take the loans in the first place. How did you set about answering that question?
Well, I'm obviously vested interest here, as in I have children of that age who are, it just started in university and one more still to go. So it is like, you kind of, you look at this and think, well, I didn't have to pay all this. I had a student loan from the student loans company. I was one of the first to have it, actually, in the early 90s. And, I was able to repay that, I think, in my early 30s, from what I can remember. And so you do feel like an obligation to be able to help. And I think it's prompted a whole kind of soul-searching amongst a lot of people around this kind of
guilt.
Exactly, generational guilt of, we didn't leave university with these enormous amounts of debt, which is going to leave people hampered for many, many years. So I was sort of looking at it from the perspective of, if I have excess money, should I be just saying to them, don't take the student loans, I'll try and fund it from my own income and my own savings, and then we do it that way. And
presumably you intend at various points in their life to help them anyway, even if that's the end of your life, So it's a question of how and when you do it. And this is obviously a potential route to do that.
Yeah, exactly. You can kind of see it almost as a sort of bringing forward of that kind of bequeathing and inheritance of, doing it whilst at a time where you can see them benefit from it. But it's also, it's just, if you look at your family finances as holistic, it's a kind of simple calculation in my head of, what's going to get the best outcome for me? And so, I apply my usual logic. I'm kind of looking at what returns could I get if I invested the money, and how would that pan out? Now, we never know what the returns are going to be, and so it's always that with that in mind and considering that. But if you took, for example, say the US stock market has returned nearly 10%, 9.7% a year since 1900. So if you took that as an estimate of, and that's a very high return, that would be very punchy. But if you did take that and then you invested that over, £10,000 over 10 years, you'd get back around £24,000. Now, if you had taken the student debt, and let's say it runs at the say 3.5%, which is the inflation we've had in the UK this century so far, you would get that debt would accumulate to £14,000. So the two key figures there are £24,000 return if I invest it versus £14,000 that would accrue in interest at RPI.
Yes.
So you've got much more money going the other route of investing. Now, as I say, not guaranteed, and you could get less than you put in even. So it may not work, but using history as at least a kind of starting reference point, then you would think that would be the better route to do. And that's the one that I'm doing. And then that gives you those options. It gives you, as I see it, there's the hardest challenge that people in their 20s have is trying to get on the property ladder, and even their 30s trying to get on the property ladder. And the one area where you can really make a difference and help is trying to get them towards that property deposit. So in my mind, it's better for us to keep that optionality, if you like, rather than say, don't take the student debt, take the student debt. You're in the boat with everybody else. Any improvement in the terms that might come, you benefit from. If life doesn't work out, the debt gets wiped at the end, in the sense of, you've got that kind of stopgap, although admittedly with the 40-year thing, that's different versus the 30-year, cut off for the plan too. And then you can do that. You can help them get on the property ladder and give them that kind of better start in life that way.
Yeah, and just thinking through the different options there of sort of using your savings to pay the fees and maintenance up front, or hanging on to it, letting it accrue with interest and investment growth, etc. The experience of those things are going to be very different. The cost of you hanging on to your savings, I suppose, is that your kids will basically have a little bit less every single month from their paychecks because an extra amount is going out in student loan repayments.
Yeah.
Nice for you. It's going to accrue in your investment ISA or what have you. But then presumably there will come points along the way where you're like, well, you'll deploy that. Yeah, you've mentioned, a house deposit perhaps, or other money along the way.
This comes back to that whole, there's a thing around relationships in families that you need to look at and think about, as in the trust level, and when you do give them that money, and whether you actually use their ISAs, because obviously everybody gets a £20,000 ISA allowance. So you'll have one, and your partner will have one, and your children will have one. And so, it may be more advantageous if you are maxing out, if you're lucky enough to be maxing out your own allowances, than actually giving them the money in an ISA, which may be a continuation of junior ISAs or child trust funds that they may have had anyway. That becomes the pot that they can use if you trust them to do that. Of course, the alternative is, and you don't trust them, then yes, you'd have to use your own ISA allowances to do that in a tax efficient way. And then the other thing is potentially it could even be your pension. If you get access to your pension at 55 at the moment, that's rising soon to 57. So the money you've saved into any sort of company pension or SIP would be then accessible to you, and that it may be that you can put that money away that way, and then able to withdraw it in after you've reached that age, which is a time that you could then help them out. It's complicated though, in terms of when you're taking out, you're going to be taxed on that money. So apart from there's a tax-free 25% allowance within that, but there's options to consider. I mean, financial advice is a good route to go if you start looking at those sort of complicated calculations for that type of stuff.
Just finally then on this, one of the things that really makes this hard, the route you've chosen means that you don't have to take this sort of guess that often has to happen around, a child's future earnings, although, because that's what these decisions are going to depend on. You don't actually know that. It feels like your route is, okay, there's uncertainties over that, but you've got a bit more control as it is. You could, if you spent the money on tuition fees and maintenance now, you just don't really know if that's going to pay off.
There's a sort of insurance to it, isn't it, really?
Yeah.
I think the insurance being that, yes, if it doesn't work out, or if they just choose a, very low paying career, then there is that element that some of the money will be wiped out.
Exactly. They would have been one of the winners in that system by getting sort of more than their share of the sort of collective.
Exactly. I mean, I do think as well that it's got that element of, to be invested, once they're invested and they see the merits of investing and see the power of doing that, I think it's good to be having that, to be able to see that process, to see how it works, and then they understand how quickly they could get to a property deposit by doing that. So I think it's got all those other kind of psychological benefits of the sort of merits of saving, as well as, because of course, to look at it the other way, when we're talking about the interest rate, so you've got like the sort of the it's really a brutal lesson in compounding, all of this, in terms of the way, that we all know about,
debt accrues.
Debt accrues very, very quickly, but investments, you're just flipping it and using the power of compounding on investments that should, if history were, a good guide, that they should be a higher rate than the inflation rate, and that you'll therefore get more money.
Okay, that's about all the time we have for now, Andrew. I will just remind you all that if you found this useful or interesting, to please subscribe to the channel. Hit that bell icon to get notified as soon as new content is released. Give us a like or share the episodes if you want to do that. And if you're interested in these topics, do sign up for more great and free content from Andrew, me, Tom, and the rest of the team. Just follow the links in the description of this video to sign up to that. That all said, Andrew, thanks for joining me.
Pleasure.